All right, so hello and welcome back, everyone. Um, Today we're going to be talking about production calculations for the course project for BSU's MIET 392 underground mining class. So some of the information that you're about to receive has been given to you in the project guidelines, which are available on the website. And so we're going to take that and we're going to look at, how much coal we're going to be producing from this portion of the mine, what our monthly production figures are going to look like and that sort of thing. So let's jump right into it. And first off, I put all of my projections on the map. I left the mains the way they were, drove my panels off to the north, that sort of thing. And so let's get our laser pointer back on again. Laser pointer all the time, messing me up. So the way I laid out my panels was 6 entries, rib to rib slab cuts. Leaf blocks in here marked with an L, which are a little bit too big, whatever. To denote blocks that are to be left in place. Okay, so this provides support, in the form of a barrier for our mains here. So I went ahead and put in all my projections. Okay, and then also projected the bleeders as well, so there'll be unmined rows of coal here. Probably 2 leaf blocks in an ideal situation. So that you have ventilation for the bleeders, right? And that's going to connect back into the north mains return right here. And so in the mains, we've got 8 entries projected. They're on 80 by 120 foot centers. So in AutoCAD, the mains are 2,800 feet long, right? And 2,800 feet times 8, that's 22,400 feet of advance for the entries in the mains. There's also 24 crosscuts that have to be driven, right? And they have to be driven across 7 pillars that are 60 feet wide, right? The entry's already been mined out. All we're missing is this crosscut. So 24 times 7 times 60 is 10,080 feet of advance. Okay, so feet of advance being 20 feet wide, however, tall, 9.25 is the maximum, but so let's say 9 feet average. That, for 1 foot of advance, that's what we've mined out, right? And that's a total of 32,480 feet of advance for developing the mains. The panels have 6 entries projected on 80 by 110 foot centers. So the panels are 4,360 feet long. There's 6 entries, and so that gives us 26,160 feet of advance. There's 40 crosscuts that have to be mined per panel. And there's 5 pillars, and there's 60 feet that you have to mine. So that's 12,000 feet of advance to mine the crosscuts, right? So that's a total of 38,160 feet of advance multiplied by 5 panels gives us a total of 190,800 feet of advance. Adding in the mains, we get the total development of 223,280 feet of advance. An advance is spelled wrong. That's all right. Doesn't matter. What about from retreat mining? So retreat mining in the panels, we have 80 by 110 foot centers for our pillars, right? So we have, if we're doing the full Christmas tree from both sides, we have approximately a theoretical sort of maximum of 10 35-foot cuts and 2 sort of like 20-foot cuts from the crosscut. So when we take those 10 cuts, right? We multiply that by 11.5 feet. That's our width of our miner head because we're only taking that amount out. And we divide that by 20, we get the equivalent of 5 3/4 equivalent cuts. So when we multiply that by 35 feet, we get 201 feet of advance. When we do the same calculation for the two 20-foot cuts, we get an additional 23 feet of advance. So that's approximately 225 feet of advance per pillar. That's not unreasonable. 1.75 pillars per day, that might be just slightly fast. And you would normally take into account that your rate of mining is a little bit slower on retreat than it is on advance. So you're not going to get quite as many feet per shift. It's close. In my experiences, it runs around 20 or 25, so you may be basically missing a cut. But, that's been taken into account in the project as an overall mining rate of 200, feet a shift is what we assumed. So anyways, to get back on track, it's about 225 feet of advance to fully extract this pillar. And then what about from the main? So we can do the same thing again. The pillars are a little bit longer. We get basically an additional cut. So we're looking at about 6.9 equivalent cuts or 242 feet of advance. In the pillar itself, we add on that additional 23, and that gives us about 265 feet of advance to extract that pillar, and that's a rate of about 1.5 pillars per day. And that's pretty close to a pretty good number for pillars this size. This is very close to what I've experienced in the past. So how many pillars are going to be retreat mined? In the panels, there are 38 rows, and I'm multiplying this by 5 plus 1 pillars. Now, why is that? Well, we do have 5 pillars to extract, but we're also extracting 30 feet from each rib, basically an additional pillar's worth. So that is an equivalent of 228 pillars per panel. And if we multiply that by 225 feet per pillar, we get 51,300 feet of advance that have to be mined to extract all of those pillars in one panel. If we multiply that by 5 panels, we're at 256,500 feet. In the mains, we can do the same thing. There are 20 rows of pillars that will be mined. And there's 5 pillars that will be mined out of there for a total of 100. The pillars are a little bit bigger, 265 feet. That gives us 26,500 feet of advance to extract all of the pillars out of the mains. So how long does all this take, right? So to develop the mains, 32,480 feet, divided by 200 feet of advance per shift, that gives us 162 shifts. If there are 2 of those production shifts per day, that gives us 81 days. 26 days a month gives us 3.1 months. That's how long it takes to develop the entirety of the mains. You obviously wouldn't do that all at once. You would mine up, and then you would turn your first right panel as soon as you possibly can. That way you're producing as much as possible as soon as you can. But that's how long it takes to do the whole thing. To develop a panel, 38,160 feet of advance, we divide by the same 200. We get 191 shifts, which is equivalent to 96 days or 3.7 months. Okay? To retreat mine a panel, 51,300 feet is what's contained within all those pillars, plus the slab cut. That's 257 shifts, which is 129 days or about 5 months. So it's taking us longer to retreat the panel than it does to mine it. That's a good thing, right? The more you can mine without having to put bolts in, better off you'll be. So to retreat the mains, that's 26,500 feet of advance, which is equivalent to 133 shifts, which is 67 days or 2.6 months. So that's how long it takes to do basically each individual part, right? So develop and retrieve a panel, it takes 8.7 months. 5 panels would therefore take 43.5 months. And then to develop and retrieve the mains, we're looking at 5.7 months. That gives us a total of about 49.2 months, basically 4 years, right? That's how long it's going to take to mine this with one miner section, given the production that we described. And so what's all this clean tons per foot stuff that you see in the project guidelines? If we look at our geologic column, we get an average coal thickness of 52 inches. And that's about 4 1/3 feet, 4.33. And so we take that and we multiply that by 20. That's our mining width multiplied by 1. We get a volume, right? So every foot of advance that we mine, we get this volume. And it's 86.6 cubic feet. And if we multiply that by 80 pounds per foot cubed, cubic foot, we get just under 7,000 pounds of coal every foot that we mine, right? If we divide that by 2,000, we get 3.5 clean tons per foot. This is a pretty good number to use, particularly if it's a metallurgical coal that you're mining, this 80 pounds per cubic foot, because generally it's a bit lighter because you've washed it to a lower specific gravity than if you were selling steam coal, right? So that's a good number to use. We get 3.5 with that. But you can also use plant recovery and sort of think about it in this way. We know that the average rock thickness here is 4.71 feet, right? And so if we look at how many tons of that we're mining per foot of advance, we get 94.2 cubic feet. But because rock's a lot heavier, let's just throw in this average, 160, you're looking at about 15,000 pounds of rock or so, right? Which is 7.5 tons. And so when we add that in, that gives us our sort of run of mine tons, right? So, 11 tons are coming out of the mine, right? Roughly speaking. And that's about, our 3.5 clean tons per foot is about 32% of that 11 tons, which is, I say approximately 35%, because I said 35%, plant recovery in the guidelines. This calculation gives me 32%. I probably just read that wrong, who knows? But it doesn't really matter because chances are you're going to be tasked with making a map that's in clean tons per foot. And that's what you're going to be basing what you mine. And so for monthly production, we were looking at 200 feet of advance, right, per shift. So that's 400 feet a day because we have 2 operating shifts per day. With 26 days a month, I said 6 days a week. So if you don't consider like any downtime for vacation or something, 52 weeks in a year, right? So that's 26 days a month, 10,400 feet of advance per month. We multiply that by the clean tons per foot to get 36,400 tons per month that we are mining. And that's clean tons, right? That's clean tons a month. And like I said, because of this, very thick inseam parting, we have a tremendous amount of reject, but there's still a significant amount of coal there. If we multiply that by the number of months, we get basically 1.8 million clean tons, and you're pulling pillars in less than 5 months. So you get in there, you turn, you drive your first panel. Less than 5 months, you're already pulling pillars, which is a good place to be. So you can do that relatively quickly. These are the sort of numbers that would be, sort of expected, in a report, particularly like in the executive summary part. You're going to be talking about, we're going to be mining this much a month. We're going to get a total of this much. We're going to be relatively quickly into, higher production, right? That sort of thing. And so in the report, production section, you're going to want to discuss more details, so like I said, basically the answers go in the executive summary. In the production section, you're going to discuss the rate of advance, and why cutting might be difficult in the scenario. Discuss the monthly production, how that was determined, how much development is going to be required before you begin pillaring. It's like the timeline, right? That's kind of important. And of course, discuss like the life of the project, how long it's going to take to mine, etc. And so with that, that concludes the production calculations for the course project for Bluefield State University's MIET 392 underground mining class. So we've kind of kept this a little bit basic. I've determined all these values. Sort of these are hand calculations basically based off of a drawing. All right, so when we get into our senior design project and that sort of thing, you'll be using software that will have production schedulers in it and be able to give reports and that sort of thing. But I want you to know, what goes on in the background behind that, how those, numbers, are calculated and that sort of thing, right? So that you know what's going on when we go to do this. So with that, we'll see you next time.